After 281 chapters, the Diamond Squad are finally back. And they're not alone, because they brought with them two characters we've been dying to meet in the manga for years now. That being the Diamond Kingdom's 8th Shining General, finally upgrading from a silhouette to a full-on character, and the long-requested and highly sought-after final member of the Four Great Spirits, as well as a bunch of other unexpected guests showing up in this chapter to help even the odds against Lucius. Alright, gotta say, this chapter reminds me a lot of chapter 284, where we saw Noel's group, the Spirit Guardians, and the elves all show up at the last second, helping to turn the tide of the war against the devils just as things were reaching their darkest point during that arc. Well, darkest point during that part of it anyway, because I mean, obviously things got even darker once Lucifer showed up. But still, when the new iteration of the Royal Knights were backed into a corner after the bad guys got a significant power-up, Noel and co showed up just at the right moment to help even the odds. And now we have Mars and his group, Sally and the researchers, and the elves coming in at the 11th hour to do the exact same thing. Oh, and it's also worth noting that chapter 284 was also the last chapter that Leo appeared in. No sign of him in this chapter, but I promise, he is coming. But getting back to these groups, they don't really get to do too much in this chapter. It's mostly just a quick showcase of each one saying, hey, we're here too, with Sally's group getting the most attention. But even with how brief their appearances were, their inclusion in this chapter helped to give you that sense that things are going to work out. Because yeah, sure, obviously at the end of all this, the good guys are going to win. But after seeing the Paladins get those monstrous transformations, I'm not going to lie, I did get a bit worried. Because like, it took everything the Silva siblings, Yami, Ichika, Noct, and Mario Leona had to take those three down the first time. But now immediately after being defeated, they're back, now much stronger, and back to full health. Yeah, I'm going to be worried about their chances of winning. And that's not even counting the Angels also getting their own monstrous upgrades, who the normal Magic Knights could barely hold their own against before. Now, it should basically be a one-sided slaughter. Actually, correction, even more of a one-sided slaughter. Because the only reason why the Magic Knights stood a chance before was because Yuno was giving them a major boost with his Neverland. And now that that's over, they wouldn't stand a chance against the normal Angels, let alone these more monstrous ones. But seeing the elves come flying in to take on the angels not only gets you hyped about them showing up in this war, but also gives you that feeling that things aren't as one-sided anymore. That being said though, they are still technically on the losing end of things, as even if they are able to defeat all three paladins again and take out the angels, until Lucius is taken down, he can just continue to respawn them over and over again. Which means until Asta is back up, this war is still not in our favor, but that doesn't stop me from being excited by all of these groups returning in this chapter. Speaking of, let's go over each of them, starting with the elves, because they get the least amount of screen time, but I feel like they are the biggest support that we get in this chapter. Because each one of them is likely strong enough to pretty easily take down one of the angels by themselves, as proven by Elfana and Beto in the background, both overpowering one each. And the funny thing is, I honestly almost didn't notice the two of them. At first I thought it was just Pantry and Raya that showed up, because Tabata made sure to put them front and center, even gave them both their own panels to have a quick bit of dialogue. While for some reason, Fauna and Beto were relegated to literal background characters, so small that I wouldn't blame anyone for not even seeing them the first time they read the chapter. I guess the reason why Tabata put so much focus on those two, but not the other two, is because they have a stronger connection to humans. Well, I mean, Raya not so much. You could definitely argue there's a bit of a connection, at least on his part, with Mario Leona, since he did seem to take a genuine interest in her during their fight. Though you could say the exact same thing about Beto. In fact, probably even more so for him, because their one-on-one fight lasted much longer and was much more intimate than Raya's. But I feel like Raya is definitely the more popular out of the two, so maybe that's why Tabata gave him the spotlight here instead of Beto. However, the human connection definitely played a factor with Patry, because him and William's connection is one of the strongest between any two characters we've seen in the entire story. I mean hell, they were literally sharing a body at one point. It'd be weird if they weren't close. Honestly, I'm surprised it took him this long to come and help him. Plus, while it's never been outright confirmed, based on what we've seen of the two, it kind of feels like there's supposed to be an implied romantic interest between them. But I could be reading too much into that. But despite who got to focus or not in this chapter, this is still a pretty stacked squad, because each of the elves vastly outmatch all the no-name Magic Knights in power, and even some of the named ones. So they greatly help take some of the pressure off the Magic Knights who had to split their time between helping civilians and fighting. And I imagine in the coming chapters, we'll at the very least see Patry jumping in and help William against whoever he is currently fighting. Also, it would be kind of cool if Raya, Veto, or both of them show up and help Mary Leona fight off against Aesir, because based on his track record, doesn't seem like Fugoyon's gonna be jumping in to help her anytime soon. Next up is Branch Zero of the Clover Kingdom's magical tool researchers, which is the one I've seen the most buzz about online because of the surprise appearance of Millie Maxwell, a character from the Black Clover Sword of the Wizard King movie, which between her and Lucius using the magic of some of the Wizard Kings from that movie officially marks the movie as canon. So yeah, you can imagine why so many people are excited about her showing up in this chapter. But me personally, I was just excited to see my girl Sally again. It still kills me that she didn't end up joining the Black Bulls after the Elf arc like I hoped, but Tabata has made sure that she's had an important role each saga, so at the very least we still get to see her quite often. And just like how she created the camouflaging robes that helped the knights sneak into the Spade Kingdom in the last saga, she came back with a brand new invention that helps turn the tides of this fight in this chapter. Anti-magic bullets that when shot will cut off the target's magic for 5 whole seconds. Which may not sound like a lot of time, but in a life or death fight, even 1 second could be fatal. So this is definitely a game changer for the Magic Knights, who after seeing them in action instantly got their second wind and are ready to fight again. And let's not forget Valtos, because it's thanks to his spatial magic that they're able to hit the angels so quickly that they don't even have time to react. And even more important is Rade's, whose Wraith magic lets them swipe the souls trapped inside of each of the angels right out of them. Honestly, watching this group in action kinda makes me a little annoyed that they weren't here earlier. I mean, I get it, they say they waited to the very last minute to show up because they wanted to make sure the bullets were 100% ready. Okay, yeah, I get it, that makes sense. But at the very least, Rade should have been here from the start because he would have been as much of a game changer in this fight as Asta or Yuno. Though I guess if he had, Lucius would have targeted him right away just like he did the other two, either killing him quickly or just making him into another one of his paladins. But just like with the elves, these guys showing up greatly increase the odds of the Magic Knights not only surviving this fight, but actually winning. Honestly, the Diamond Squad are really the least relevant ones that show up in this chapter because it takes all 8 of them just to take on one Morris. However, before we write them out completely, it is worth noting that they all have a stake in this specific fight, as Morris not only corrupted their home kingdom for years, turning it into his own personal research lab and making most of them into test subjects for his inhumane experiments, but he also, after finally being outed from the kingdom, aided the Spade Kingdom in conquering it. So yeah, I imagine that each and every one of them are itching to get back at him. That's why instead of heading to the main battlefield, they specifically sought him out. And well, who are we to get in the way of their revenge? It's honestly just nice to see these characters again, regardless of who they're fighting, because we just saw Sally and the elves more recently at the end of the Space Saga, but it's been legit since chapter 101 since we last saw this group. Well, all of them except for Lotus, because we did just see him in the Space Saga as well. But it is nice to see Mars finally making good on his promise from that chapter to come and help Asta when he's in trouble. Though to be fair, the reason he didn't before is because he was a bit busy. Leading a rebellion doesn't leave a lot of time for taking side quests, so him showing up during the Elf arc was never going to happen. And then I imagine that the Dark Triad taking over his kingdom didn't help give him more free time. So really, now is the only time that they realistically had to come and help Asta during a big battle, because they seemingly had a little over a year apiece to focus in on rebuilding the kingdom from the ground up. Though, supposedly, Tabata revealed at some point he did have an arc planned where we would go and visit the Diamond Kingdom, but he ended up having to scrap it, so it sounds like things might not have been completely peaceful during the time skip. And really, it's too bad that we didn't get that arc, because then we could have had a much better introduction to their brand new teammate, the 8th Shining General of the Diamond Kingdom, Faramina, who, as we find out in the chapter, is the host of the Great Earth Spirit, who is seemingly some kind of giant mud creature. I don't know, we don't really get to see enough of it for me to really tell exactly what it's supposed to be, but it's definitely impressive. And considering its size, Faramina must be too. Because one common thing about each of the spirits so far has been that the more powerful the person they're contracted to are, the larger they become. Except in Belle's case, where her development in correlation to Yuno's power level is how mature she looks, going originally from looking like a little girl to now looking like a woman in her mid-20s. So, considering that the Earth Spirit dwarfs all of them in size, with the exception to the now monsterized Morris, that means Faramina must be extremely powerful. It's just too bad we don't get to see the fight in full in this chapter, though I am holding out hope that a future chapter will focus in on it. Last thing I want to mention about this group is that I completely missed in my first reading of the chapter that Fanzel used his wind magic to help Mimosa and Asta escape, So now they're back on the run, and things should be much safer now, with no more paladins free to try to stop them. But until Asta is fully healed, this battle is still far from over, and we'll have to wait and see what obstacles they'll have to face next in chapter 383.